Football is a cutthroat business. Over the past couple of decades, there have been some absolutely brutal manager sackings. David O'Leary took Leeds to the Champions League and UEFA Cup semi-finals and never finished outside of the top 5 in his 4 years at the club. Sacked, with 2 years remaining on his contract. Carlo Ancelotti won a league and FA Cup double with Chelsea in 2010. His reward? Booted out a year later. Roberto Mancini won Man City the first Premier League title of the Sheikh Mansour era in 2012. By May 2013, he was queuing up at the job centre. Roberto Di Matteo rescued Chelsea's season from the jaws of disaster, won an FA Cup and brought Abramovich his long-coveted holy grail, the Champions League. He was afforded just 20 more games before being unceremoniously flung on the scrap heap. Claudio Ranieri literally worked miracles and helped to write perhaps the finest fairy tale story in sporting history, taking over Leicester City after they had scraped survival and turned them into Premier League champions. Mere months after this historic achievement, and he was deemed surplus to requirements and sent to the chopping block. Mauricio Pochettino helped transform Spurs and led them to the first Champions League final in their history. He was given 3 months of the new season before Levy axed him. Thomas Tuchel won the Champions League and Club World Cup with Chelsea in 2021. At least he was given over a year before being launched early into the 22-23 campaign. As unfair and shocking as many of these dismissals seem on the surface, if we dig a little deeper, some logic and reasoning behind them emerges. Over £100 million was invested in the playing squad during O'Leary's tenure, which contributed to their financial turmoil after he left. And yet he won nothing, and they bottled the league on several occasions.
Our ambition is a top 4 Champions League team.
Roman Abramovich is a man with staggeringly high expectations, and a season without a trophy, regardless of the fact the Blues were 3 games away from winning the league,
champions in all but name,
was simply an unacceptable outcome for the Russian. Add this to Ancelotti's unwillingness to field the owner's latest plaything, Fernando Torres, and while still extremely harsh in my view, some sense to the dismissal can be gleaned. Roberto Mancini fell victim to his poor performance in the Champions League, an unattractive brand of football, and unstable and toxic relationships with some players and staff, leading to what was ultimately probably the right decision in the end. Di Matteo's wild successes relied much upon his best players bailing him out and playing out of their skins. He time and time again proved himself not to be tactically astute enough to succeed consistently at the top level. The fact he hasn't managed since being sacked by Championship side Aston Villa in 2016 speaks volumes.
You're gonna get the sack at some point.
Claudio Ranieri brought the kind of success to Leicester which he could not possibly follow up. Arguably, he should have walked away on the ultimate high. Reports of dressing room dissatisfaction and some dire performances and results meant that the threat of relegation was very real. The board had to act to avert that disastrous scenario, which they did.
He should have got it at least at the end of the season.
Poch is another one who was overseeing a stagnating squad which seemed to be moving backwards, as well as no longer responding to his tactics and management. He possessed a vision regarding recruitment which did not align with that of the owners. And with Thomas Tuchel, well, top bowling. There is one dismissal, however, that for the life of me I can find no good reason for. It was a decision so disastrous that the ramifications of it could be felt over a decade later. As a player, Vicente Del Bosque enjoyed a success-laden career in the Madrid midfield, making over 400 appearances for them and winning 5 La Ligas and 4 Copa del Reys throughout the 70s and early 80s. After his time as a player had come to an end, he managed Los Blancos reserve team, Real Castilla, for some years, as well as a spell coaching the youth side. In 94 and 96, he had 2 very fleeting stints as caretaker manager of the first team. His big chance would come in 1999 though, and Del Bosque was ready to grab it with both hands. Madrid were a club in disarray under Welshman John Toshak, laying 8th in the league after an underwhelming start. The loquacious Toshak was sacked. The final straw had come after his public demolishment of his keeper Albano Bizzarri for conceding, and I quote, "goals which make me weep." Implored by President Lorenzo Sanz to retract his criticism, Toshak said, "There's more chance of a pig flying over the Bernabeu than for me to withdraw my comments." In the end, it was him who went flying out the front door. Del Bosque was the man tasked with shepherding Los Blancos through to the end of the season. He inherited a squad brimming with exceptional young homegrown talent, like an 18-year-old Iker Casillas, 22-year-olds Guti and Raul, the 23-year-old Morientes and Ivan Helguera, a year older than him. Mixed in with the considerable foreign talents of Roberto Carlos and 2 superstar new arrivals from the Premier League, Nicola Anelka and Steve McManaman. Madrid struggled and stuttered domestically that season, and Del Bosque was unable to overcome the positional handicap he had been dealt, and they finished 5th. Despite suffering an embarrassing 8-3 aggregate loss to Bayern in the groups, the Champions League would be the stage for Del Bosque's burgeoning managerial managerial prowess to shine. After a 0-0 draw against holders Man United at the Bernabeu in the first leg of the quarters, the Spaniard pulled off a tactical masterstroke, switching to a back three and unleashing the rapid counter-attacking prowess of his fullbacks. Within 60 minutes, they were 3-0 up and would hold on to win 3-2. Alex Ferguson doffed his cap to his counterpart's strategic switch-up. They'd never played that formation before. I suppose it was a compliment to us, but we were too slow to adjust. Los Blancos exacted revenge over Bayern with a close 3-2 aggregate semi-final victory. The climax was an all-La Liga showcase against Valencia. Goals from Morientes, McManaman and Raul sealed a comfortable win. Del Bosque had been intended to be a temporary solution, but he had masterfully brought Real's 8th Champions League trophy back to the Bernabeu. The summer of 2000 was one of monumental change in the boardroom. Florentino Perez ousted Sanz in an early election and made good on his campaign promise to bring Portuguese superstar Luis Figo in from Barca in one of the most controversial transfers of all time. Equally important, but much more underrated an acquisition, was the industrious and dominating midfield presence of Claude Makelele. A deep run in the Champions League saw Del Bosque's boys face Bayern again in the semis, but Dairotin got their revenge. Domestically though, they were irresistible, playing fluid, expansive football, with new boy Figo thrilling the Madridistas with 18 assists and 9 goals as Madrid swept to the Liga title, 7 points clear of Deportivo. Perez motored on with his Galacticos master plan, breaking the world transfer record to bring in the world's best player, Zinedine Zidane from Juventus, the key piece in allowing Del Bosque to construct the Madrid midfield of his dreams. A diamond shape held together by the underappreciated yet crucial Makelele, flanked by Figo and Solari and tipped by Zidane, were spearheaded by best mates Raul and Morientes. Stuttering form in Spain saw them endure some desperately disappointing losses, which led to a third-place finish, allowed for shimmering performances in Europe. They brushed aside Bayern in the quarters, blitzed Barca in the semis, and unleashed beautiful French brilliance against Leverkusen in the final. That made it 2 Champions Leagues in 3 years of Del Bosque management and 9 in total for Los Blancos. The summer of 2002 brought the arrival of the phenom, Ronaldo Nazario, and Del Bosque had a dressing room full of huge egos and superstars. For someone apparently lacking personality and character, he made it all work. Victory in the Intercontinental Cup laid the foundations for a thrilling La Liga tussle with Real Sociedad. Superb end-of-season form where they went unbeaten in 5, saw a 3-1 victory over Bilbao on the final day be enough for Real Madrid to win it by 2 points. Del Bosque had led Madrid through their most successful period since the 1960s when Di Stefano and Puskás were tearing it up. Less than 48 hours after ensuring Madrid were once more the top dogs in Spain, Del Bosque was informed that his contract would not be renewed and he was to be relieved of his duties. None of the usual reasons for a manager sacking were relevant in this case. The fans loved Del Bosque and his attractive, successful style of play. A top-notch man-manager, he was hugely popular and respected amongst his troupe of superstar players, as evidenced by the way they celebrated with him on the pitch after what was his final game, and the fact there was almost a revolt when they eventually found out he had been dismissed. He was not inept or incompetent, but a skilled and cunning tactician. He gave Florentino Perez no headaches during his tenure, despite the fact he had little to no say in the signings, which were almost exclusively made by the whim of the president. The line trotted out by the media was that there was a belief amongst the board that the cool, calm and quiet Del Bosque couldn't control the Galacticos, that he had not been able to impose the discipline on them that a manager should. That's just excuses and spin as far as I'm concerned. The only blemishes on his record that I can see is his generally poor performance in the Copa del Rey and failing to win a treble, as if that's not one of the most impossible things to achieve. And who knows, he may have done it given time. In my view, it all came down to appearances. Just 5 days before he callously axed the gaffer, Perez had completed perhaps the most glamorous Galactico signing to date, bringing in David Beckham from Man United. Becks may or may not have been the best player that the president had brought in, but there can be no doubt about his fame. He was really the first player who transcended the sport to become a global icon, the Michael Jordan of football if you will. The image of Madrid that Perez was trying to project on the world was new, bold, brash and sexy. The humble, patient, unassuming and ugly Del Bosque was a mismatch which Florentino clearly could not handle. The years following the manager's sacking go to prove how unequivocally shit of a decision it really was. Perez quickly discovered that managers of Del Bosque's quality did not grow on trees, as he ate his way through 5 in just 3 seasons. It also became clear that winning league titles and Champions Leagues was not a given just because you had the most expensively assembled squad of all time, and clearly the quiet genius of the manager had something to do with it, as it took until 2007, 4 full seasons for Real Madrid to get their hands on anything more significant than a Spanish Super Cup and win La Liga again. And as for all big years, well, it took an excruciating 11 years for La Decima to finally be completed. And what of Del Bosque's fortunes? Euros. Well, in 04-05, he had an unsuccessful stint in Turkey with Beşiktaş before taking a break from football. In 2008, he was appointed the manager of the Spanish national team. In his 8 years at the helm, he turned Spain into a formidable force and one of the most dominant teams in international football history, as he won their first and only World Cup in 2010 and followed it up with a victory at the Euros 2 years later. The wildly differing fortunes of Del Bosque at his former club Madrid in the 10 or so years after his dismissal just goes to show what a jaw-droppingly, head-scratchingly awful decision it truly was.